Hi, my name is Ferreira. I'm a professor of music theory here at Colorado State University, and I'm also a professional freelance clarinetist in and around the northern Colorado area. So today I'd like to address a few of the issues that I like to deal with in the slow excerpt for the all-state-based clarinet audition material. So in the slow excerpt, the first thing to take note of is the tempo marking of quarter note equals 72 at the beginning. Make sure you're always practicing this excerpt with a metronome right from the very beginning, so you know exactly how to structure the rhythm around the marked tempo. So a few rhythms I want to address specifically is the rhythm in measure 15. So you'll note in measure 15, we have a half note tied to an eighth note, and then we move into the 16th note triplets on the and of 3. So I wanted to give you a way to practice that particular rhythmic structure. So the first thing I would do at this slow of a tempo, what we can actually do is be subdividing the eighth notes underneath our larger quarter note beat of 72. So here's what 72 sounds like. So if there's our beat of 72, if I want to break that quarter note beat now into eighth note beats. So I'm going to break that down thinking 1 and 2 and 3 and. So I'm going to break this beat down into eighth notes. And when I'm practicing this rhythm in measure 15, I'm going to actually play this E. I'm going to articulate out underneath the 5 underlying eighth notes that belong to both the half note and the eighth note that it's tied to on beat 3. So one way I would suggest practicing this is to tongue 5 eighth note E's over the duration of that half note tied to an eighth note so that you know exactly where to place the triplet 16th notes that occur on the 6th eighth note of the bar. So here's one way, here's what that would sound like if we're subdividing that E into its composite eighth notes. So just to make sure you know exactly where to place that triplet 16th on the and of 3, practice again just feeling those 5 eighth notes underneath that half note E tied to the eighth note on beat 3. That's one spot I would recommend doing that. Another one, find bar 17. This tie in beat 2 that goes over into beat 3, this can also be subdivided into its composite eighth note beats underneath as well. So in that tie, what you're going to actually do is you're going to articulate out 4 eighth notes. So 2 for the quarter note, and you're going to hear 2 clicks on the dotted eighth note itself, and we'll be moving after the 4th click. So what this rhythm would sound like, again, if we're going to beat out the underlying eighth notes on beat 2, this is how I would suggest practicing this particular excerpt. So you want to hear 4 eighth notes, then moving into that 16th note off of beat 3. So here's beat 2. So then when we put the rhythm back in time against our quarter note, we're going to internally keep dividing those eighth notes underneath, but now we'll play the rhythm as written. So taking anything with a dot can be subdivided into something, into a grouping of 3. So think about that as kind of helping you through those rhythms. That's really the two most rhythmically challenging sections in this particular excerpt happen here, and we want to make sure that we're subdividing those rhythms accurately. The next issue I'd like to talk about just a little bit are these musical markings. At the beginning, the piece is marked espressivo. Espressivo means expressive, so feel free to be expressive within the given tempo. You can push and pull tempo a little bit. It has to always be within the context of that quarter note equals 72 beat, but make music here. Even if there is not some dynamic shaping indicated always, still feel free to make some musical shapes. In addition, be very cognizant of the ritardando marked in the second to last measure. Take lots of time there. Be very overt and obvious in how you perform that ritardando so that the adjudicator can hear your expression of that particular marking. Then the next thing, I just wanted to indicate a quick fingering thing on clarinet. Really the only issue that we're going to run into here with fingerings is measure 12. So this is where we kind of have this persistent pinky problem on clarinet. You have to decide what pinky pattern you're going to be using in measure 12 to approach that scale. There are 2 pinky notes in that excerpt. The B natural can be played on either your right pinky or your left pinky, and this C sharp has the same issue. It can be played on the right or the left. So you need to decide, are you going to go right hand B, which will be the the middle key on the bottom cluster of your right hand. If you go right there, you have to go left on the next note. You have a second option, which is instead of right-left, you can choose to perform that excerpt left-right. This is what that would look like. Either one of those patterns will work for you very well. You just need to know exactly which one you're doing before you get to that 16th note run. The final issue I'd like to address in here is the articulation, specifically the one marked in measure 14. What you'll see at the end of measure 14 is a group of 3 staccato eighth notes, and underneath you'll also find a slur marking. As a wind player, this can often be very confusing to us. Do we want a staccato, or would you like these notes slurred together? So the way that we interpret that in wind playing is that we would like an articulation on each of those notes with very minimal spacing between the 3 eighth notes. So I'm just going to perform for you from the downbeat of measure 14 so that you can listen to the last 3 eighth notes and see how you'd like that articulation to sound. So make sure that there is tonguing on any of those articulations that are the staccato marking with the slur underneath. Overall, the slow excerpts are being used to show your ability to make musical statements, musical expression. These are not exercises of technical facility necessarily, but feel free to express your personality and your personal interpretation of this particular piece. Make lots and lots of beautiful music with this. All right, we're going to take a look at the fast excerpt marked Allegro Scherzando for the bass clarinet all-state audition, and I just wanted to talk through a few things to help with your practicing or preparation for this particular excerpt. So the first thing you'll notice is that the tempo marking here is dotted half note equals 60. So essentially what that means is when this etude is ready for performance, that you should just be hearing one large beat per bar. But when we are starting to practice this and get all of these notes underneath our fingers and practice the technical piece of this, we want to make sure that we're actually going to be practicing this at a slower tempo in order to make sure that we are choosing the appropriate fingerings, the appropriate dynamics, articulation, and other things of that nature. So I would highly suggest using a quarter note beat as you are practicing this particular piece. So the equivalent quarter note beat for the tempo marking of dotted half note equals 60 is quarter note equals 180. So if you are more comfortable performing this with the quarter note subdivision underneath, know that that is going to be your goal tempo in quarter notes. So as you're practicing this, I would suggest starting at maybe 90 to 120 is kind of an initial opening with the quarter note. So this is what this would sound like at quarter note equals 120. So if you need to take that tempo to start, just to make sure that you have all the details and the notes and all of the other markings in and are practicing them correctly, go ahead and take this slower tempo as you're starting. And know that if you'd like to keep that quarter note subdivision going, your goal tempo is going to be quarter note equals 180. So I would practice slow first. It will always get you the best result. The next item I'd like to take note of in here is that there is something called terraced dynamics. So you will notice that the fast excerpt, unlike the slow excerpt, never has any markings for really crescendos, diminuendos, or leaves a lot of space until we get to the last 4 measures of the second half. So what that means is that anytime we have a piano marking or a forte marking, we're going to treat those as if they are subito pianos or subito fortes. So one place that that's really present is going to be the end, 2 measures before the first repeat sign, where we have that forte marked on the last 4 eighth notes plus the quarter note. That particular grouping really needs to speak out as being much louder than everything that we've heard before that, which has all been marked at piano. So starting on the second beat of the penultimate measure of that first section, make sure that you're really going for a nice, loud, and full forte marking. Then the same thing happens in the second half. In the bar 25, we have now left the forte dynamic marking, and we've immediately gotten to a subito piano on the downbeat of bar 25. So make sure that you're really making an excellent motion between a loud forte ending and a nice subito piano start to the downbeat of measure 25. And then dynamically, just make sure you're really pushing towards that last forte at the end. The one crescendo we have marked in this excerpt occurs in the last 4 bars, so really go ahead and make the most of that. This is one of the only opportunities we have to create sort of a subtle shift of dynamic, and we want to make sure that we do it very quickly. Then I'd say the last thing I'd like to mention in this particular excerpt is pay attention to the articulation. You'll note that there are lots of staccato markings. At this particular tempo, don't overdo the staccatos. I want to focus a lot more on having a light articulation than having a short articulation. So staccato simply means separated. It doesn't mean short. So there just needs to be space between those notes. And at dotted half note equals 60, that is going to be, you shouldn't have to overdo the staccato piece of this, just nice and light tonguing. So again, just to kind of show you what that sounds like in the first 4 bars, no overdone staccato, just nice and light. We just want space in between those notes. And then also making sure that we're doing a really nice job focusing on that emphasis of 3 eighth notes that are slurred and 3 eighth notes that are tongued. Bring out that particular pattern. It stays relatively consistent, certainly through this first section with that particular articulation marking. But do make sure that you're paying attention to when notes are slurred together and when they're tongued, so we can make a nice distinction between that. The last articulation I'd like to draw your attention to is the beginning of the second half, measures 17 and measure 21. The downbeat of each of these bars is marked with this accent, so make sure you're hitting these notes louder, but they are not going to be shorter. So we're gonna really kind of punch through with a nice push from lower in our diaphragm to help create that potential accented sound. In general, on bass clarinet, we always want to be thinking about more air. We want to be filling up the instrument from the very top, and imagine that you're blowing all the way through out of the bell at the bottom. So lots of big sound here, and make sure you're pushing low. Also, just a general note here, don't be afraid to put more mouthpiece in your mouth. I think a lot of times we kind of get to the edge, and that can lead to sort of a weak sound or notes not speaking clearly. So make sure that you're putting enough of this mouthpiece in your mouth to help get the supported sound that you want. Best of luck as you prepare for your auditions. We'll look forward to hearing from you guys.
Thanks so much for watching this Colorado All-State Prep video. If you have any questions or concerns, please visit music.colostate.edu for more information, including the opportunity to schedule an individual visit with the School of Music, Theater, and Dance. Good luck on your audition.